It's going to take all of us to save the United States from tyranny, and one of its best, former RNC Chair and current MSNBC host Michael Steele, is here to discuss. Welcome back to Defending Democracy. I'm Marc Elias. Let's get started. Michael Steele, welcome to Defending Democracy.
Hey man, I've been looking forward to this conversation.
You and me both. I feel like you and I got a lot of ground to cover here. I want to talk about what's going on in the world today and media and all that, but I want to start with your backstory because you have a really interesting one. You wind up becoming the lieutenant governor of Maryland as a Republican.
hmm
You wind up becoming the RNC chair. And now you are a host on MSNBC. So give us a little bit of that. There's a, that's a wide, we're covering a lot of ground.
Dude, sometimes I wonder myself how the hell I got here, but here I am. Look, I was born at Andrews Air Force Base in Prince George's County, Maryland, raised in Washington, D.C. That's my home. I love D.C. So you can imagine how I feel about what's happening to the city right now with Trump. But I grew up at a very transitional time in the country, and my politics was formed by my environment. And oddly enough, I emerged a Republican out of all of that, which shocked the hell out of my family, as you could probably imagine. But that journey for me has been one of always sort of discovering and pushing myself and learning. And that's why a guy like you, and I've run into many folks with your intellect and your sense of appreciation of history and all of that. Those things have always been informative for me, and it sort of created this journey through my time as a seminarian, as an Augustinian.
Oh, I missed
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So you imagine I was very proud when Pope Leo was elected as an Augustinian, the first Augustinian Pope. But yeah, I was in the Augustinian order at Villanova and spent a few years there, and then wound up coming back home, getting married, settling into law, and not really looking at doing anything in politics. And next thing I know, I'm a county chairman in Prince George's County, state chairman, and then a lieutenant governor. And I'm like, what the hell happened? But in all of those journeys, man, it's always been for me about, I can play the partisan game. I can be a hard charging, Republican when I need to be. But I learned a lot about public service. And I think a lot of that's oriented in my time in the seminary. And this idea, what drew me into that life was this idea of service. When I left, my question was, how do I continue to serve? And I found myself working in these various spaces, that led me to where I am now. And the TV platform is just one where that's for me an extension of that service, being a
How
voice.
did that come about?
What's that?
How did you go from, okay, seminary, law,
Well,
public service to TV?
yeah, most people would say this guy doesn't know what the hell he wants to do in his life, and I always consider myself sort of an accidental politician. It's not something I sought out to do, but your vocation is at the core of whatever it is that moves you and motivates you and inspires you. And again, for me, it was service. So when I finished up my job at the RNC, I immediately received a call from Phil Griffin at MSNBC, who was then the head of MSNBC, and he said, "Look, this is a crazy idea, but would you come on and be a part of our network?" As a commentator and analyst. And we talked, and I was like, okay, I get to go into the liberal playground, into their media space, be on their platform, and bring a different perspective to a lot of different issues. And so that's literally how it started. CNN also asked, but they couldn't get their act together. And MSNBC did. They were like, we want to move in a different direction. We want to level up different voices. At that time, Joe Scarborough was the preeminent Republican on the air. Believe it or not, Pat Buchanan
Oh, yeah.
was very much a part of that family, and spent a lot of time on there with Joe. Had his hiccup, and got caught in some ugly stuff and was released, and so a lot of that sort of fell to me. And 14 years later, here I am now hosting a primetime show. So it's kind of weird. My story has always been a little bit like that, but at the core of it's all about how do I continue to level up a different conversation, a message of service, etc.
Yeah, and the great thing about your show, and I say this all the time, like I don't get paid to do television. Like I
Right.
do it because I think it's a service, because I enjoy it, whatever. And so as a result, unlike a lot of other people, I can pick and choose which shows I go on, and I do. And essentially, like, anytime you guys ask whether it was in on Saturday or Sunday morning, or now it's much better for me, about a really a morning guy, in the evenings, I say yes, because you guys are one of the few shows where you are having an actual conversation.
Yeah.
Like, it's not you read question, I give answer, you go to the next question. Like, there is real interaction going on. And I wonder
Yeah.
if that is a choice that you all made, or if
Mhm.
that was just the format that was presented, or like how that came about.
No, it's absolutely a choice. It is a considered effort, to make sure that we, the three of us, Simone Sanders Townsend, Alicia Menendez, myself, that the three of us first and foremost have a conversation. And the goal is that the guests are an extension of that conversation. And so it's, like a lot of things, people want to fall back on formula,
Right.
because formula works and it's safe and it feels good. And so what we try to do is stretch that a little bit, and like you said, when a guest comes on, set it up with a question. Okay, hey, tell us about this crazy stuff that's happening, and where do we go? And then engage in that. And the one thing I really do not like, is okay, I ask a question, now it's your turn. You ask a question. I'm like, that's just not how it needs to flow. But the other thing we try to encourage the guests to do, and you're expert at this, which is why we love having you on, we can just say, hey, Marc, this crazy stuff happened, in the courts, or the Trump administration is moving in this direction. What's democracy doing? What are you guys doing? And you're off and going, and we can then follow you, as opposed to going to the piece of paper and to a scripted question or whatever, which we don't have, fortunately, but just kind of having this sort of rote response. And I think the audience likes that. It's different, it's engaging, it's live. That's why we love folks live on set as opposed to, on screen. But we know, someone like you, if you're somewhere and you can't be in a studio, then okay, we're going to take Marc where we can get Marc, because you are what we call smart TV. The audience learns, they love it, they listen, they tune in, and we can tell. It's amazing, man. I'm learning so much about how they measure this stuff. They, when certain guests come on, the audience responds, and so all of these pieces, go into making a difference in how we communicate in a time where we are up against an incredibly expert communication machine, in the negative space, by Donald Trump and his administration.
So talk a little bit about how that has changed. You were an elected official, so you had to communicate in that capacity.
Hmm.
You were a national party chair, which is really it is a both a strategic role,
Right,
helping drive strategy. It is a fundraising role. Let's not forget that. I'm sure you don't miss that part.
right,
But then it is really, as much as anything else, a communications role. It is communicating out a message. And so
right.
how has that changed? Obviously, Donald Trump is very different, but I think it's probably changed even beyond Donald Trump.
It has. I mean, it's interesting. Before we got to Trump and his pushing of the envelope, there were some of us, myself, a Chris Christie in his role as a governor, and a handful of others, even in a weird way, a Marco Rubio,
Yeah,
um,
back in the original
back
Marco
in the
Rubio, sure.
day, right? Who really kind of pushed the political envelope, by stress testing ideas, and yes, I know we support X, but what about X with a twist? And so for me as a national chairman, assuming a party, the leadership of a party that had just gotten his ass kicked in '06, again
Right.
in '08. And I've got Barack Obama at that time, one of the most popular political figures in the history of the country, sitting down the street. And I've got to try to build a party and an operation to win elections. The messaging became very, very important. How we communicate and how we target what it is that we wanted to do. So for me, it was the communication raised the money, and the money raised helped with the communication. And a lot of times, the emphasis, at least before my time, was raise the money and then you go spend it on this
Right.
stuff. My thing was, and I learned this oddly enough from one of our donors who was so angry at the party. Big government republicanism is what he called it. You know, the Bush wars, you know, the war in Iraq, and all of the expansion of government. He said, "I'm not giving you guys another damn dime." He said, because my money is going nowhere. So I said, okay, business side of my brain said, I'll give you a business plan. If I lay out for you what I want to do with the money I'm asking you to give me, I want you to give to that if it works. If it doesn't, got it. I understand. So I sat down with my team and we drew up a business plan. I sent it to him and the man maxed out. And it was an important lesson to that was people had gotten to the point where they were just giving because they were a Republican. They were asked by Karl Rove and the money machine inside the RNC, et cetera. But then when Bush left, and on the heels of that, you had all these election losses, the disillusionment set in, the frustration. A lot of the stuff we're seeing play out with
I was
Democrats
about
right
to say.
now, right? A lot of that playing out with them. All of that began to set in. And so I needed to come up with a counterweight to that. And the business model, the business plan was the way to do it. Because I said, look, my goal is to get from here to there. I want to win these elections. I'm targeting in this cycle, New Jersey and Virginia. I'm going to experiment. I'm going to do some things. And then that sets up what I can do in 2026. I mean, excuse me, in 2010. And the most important thing that I brought to that game was, guess what? State legislative races, because that's where the money is. That's the game. You want to shape politics, you change state legislatures, you win governorships, because everyone focuses on the federal.
Yep.
Everyone focuses on Congress and the
Yep.
Senate. I'm like, okay, that's a waste of time for me. I have a congressman or I don't have a congressman because of how the lines for that seat are
Yep.
drawn.
Yeah.
And so I'll have to tell you, Marc, I got so much resistance to that because they were so used to the big federal dollars, right? They didn't want to spend state dollars. They didn't want that because that's hard money, and they wanted to put it into
Right.
other things. And I'm like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to put in place. I learned from Howard Dean a 50-state strategy, and we're going to top line it looking at these congressional races, some statewide Senate races. But where we're going to win is when I get people to vote bottom up.
So
And that means, quite simply, you're going to vote for the state legislature or the mayor or the county executive because that's closest to the ground and you love those guys or you don't, right? But when you do that, you're also then going to vote up tickets. You're going to vote for the Republican for Congress. You're going to vote for the Republican for governor. And that worked. And we wound up winning over 1,000 state legislative seats.
indeed, you did. And I'm going to ask you about redistricting in a minute, but I don't know whether you've had Ken Martin on your show. I don't know whether you've
He
talked
is
to him.
actually coming on our show. We've had him on twice, and he's coming on again tonight. So yes.
Okay, I don't want to get into any private conversations we've had with him, but what would be your advice, to the Democratic Party, whether it's to Ken Martin or just more broadly? Like the Democratic Party right now seems to be an existential crisis,
Yeah.
not knowing not just how to take on Trump, because as you point out, like that's like 2028, he's term limited, there'll be a different set of players, not just 2026 with the federal races, but like if you were looking at the Democratic Party, and maybe you could be the first chair to ever be the chair of both political parties, that would be something. What would you like? What should the Democratic Party be doing?
Okay. So the first thing I do is I step back. and I take the senior leadership. There are two pieces to this. One is the senior leadership inside the building. The other is the senior leadership across the country. Those are your state chairmen, national committee men and women. And you have a conversation with the first group, your senior leadership inside the building, where you lay out your vision. And you have to understand what it is you want. That's what drives this. It's not what anybody else wants. You're the chairman. If I want to go through that door and you're telling me I can't, probably, unless you give me a good reason why I can't, I'm going through that door. And then likely you're going to be fired. I let my team know very, very quickly. And I did this when I was lieutenant governor. The easiest way to get fired on my team is to tell me we've always done it that way. It can't be done. Or any other the relevant excuses related to those 2 points. Because that tells me you're not thinking outside the box. You're not thinking creatively, given the position you have in my organization, of how you get through the problem. Not go around it, not avoid it, go through it. Because the problem is still, if you go around it, the problem's still there. You go through it, that means you've now split, you divided, you've broken it up, you put it in its respective pieces. It's not a thing that can stand in your way. So that's the first thing. What's our problem? Our problem is that right now we seem gutless to the American people. Mm-hmm. We seem like we make excuses for not doing the easy shit. And we got hard stuff to do. Right? Yeah. So the plan has got to be how you reinforce the idea that we are going to fight for the American people, because I'm not going to use big words like existential and democracy. I'm going to say you got a bully in the backyard and he's beating the crap out of your damn dog. And we're going to come in and kick his ass. And we're going to kick him out of the block. We're going to kick him out of the neighborhood. And we're going to kick him out of the county. And you work through that process where you're pushing up against the negative influences that are tearing your community apart, that are hurting your constituents. And you make it personal. And the Democrats don't want to make stuff personal. I mean, if they put half the energy, Mark, in going after Donald Trump that they put into going after David Hogg, maybe they could do some things. And that's the problem. So that's one. The second piece is the statewide operations.
Okay.
I'm looking at a state chairman going, what the hell are you doing? What are your targets? What congressional seats are you targeting? What governorships have you got a governor race up this year? What are you doing? How are you coordinating and working with the DCCC, the Senatorial Committee, and the DNC? All right. So I'm not even gonna ask or take the approach where you're waiting for me to come to you, because if you're waiting for me to come to you, that means you ain't doing anything. You're waiting. So what are you bringing to the table? As I said to my state chairman, tell me what your plan is and I'll fund it. I'll put the money in place if you show me how you're going to win. Tell me how you get out of you've got 15 congressional districts in your state. How many of you, we currently hold 5 seats out of 15. What 3 Democrats can you knock off? Tell me who they are and I'll fund it. And so that energizes that level where now they've got something to fight for, because you've got a reinforcing effort by the national party and they're not swimming upstream. I'm not just saying to them, oh, I'm going to come into your state and take money out. I would do fundraising in their state and say, you keep 75% of the money, I'll take 25%. And people would go crazy. But I'm like, trust me, this is going to work. And it did. Because now when I know in the state, because I was a former state chairman, I know if I'm doing a big ass event, I've just raised $350,000 and I'm keeping 75% of that. That's a good day, as opposed to either what typically is the case, states wind up keeping 25, 30%, right, and the national party walks away with it because they got bills. That's not my problem. My bills aren't your problem. because you're my bill. So I'm going to take care of you. So I think these two pieces helps reset the stage. But the core of it is two things. One, a willingness to fight and to demonstrate that you got that fight. And two, a plan, a strategy, targets. I'm going to tell you straight up. Democrats aren't looking at 30 seats in next November. They need to just give up the game.
Hmm.
This is, for me, this is 2010, baby. I'm already, look, Senate is in play. I'm on the record. I'm saying the U.S. Senate is in play for Democrats. You've gotten great opportunities now with North Carolina, for example,
Yep.
coming online.
Maine.
What was that?
Maine.
Yep, Maine.
Sherrod Brown in Ohio.
Sherrod Brown in Ohio. Come on now. You're setting a good table. So if you've got some good pieces that you can put out in front of that community, then those two things I talked about just now, oh man, Sherrod Brown's going to be a happy puppy knowing that you've got the state party organized and focused on a plan and a strategy to help him win statewide, is win some congressional seats, and the national party is prepared to get behind that state plan effort. It makes his campaigning that much easier because he doesn't have to worry about those loose ends, because those two pieces are tying those up for the candidate, and the candidate can go do their thing.
So one of the things that I appreciate about you when I'm on your show and talking to you, it always feels like you and I are closer to on the same page, both stylistically, but also like what the ultimate goal is. You know, I came on your show, and for the first time, I had some trepidation, but I said, I'm just going to say it. I came on and said, Democrats ought to, if they try to take 5 seats, we should try to take 30. And you were like, amen. And like, yes, that's right. And that was the first time I said that publicly. This is way before even Gavin Newsom was talking about doing anything in California. I said Democrats ought to try to zero out Republicans' seats in those states, because even if it doesn't succeed, it will cause Republicans to think twice about whether they want to continue this or not. And I feel like that kind of shifting of the Overton window is something Democrats don't really do that much. I feel like it is something you viscerally connect with, and I don't know if that's because like you and I are just sort of cut from a different cloth, or if you think that's just a problem with Democrats writ large. But like, what's going on?
I think it's both. I think it's how Democrats have historically approached their politics, and at a time that was fine. I think B is also the way our brains are wired, looking at those problems and how we solve them. We're not linear thinkers. We do play 2-3 level chess. We do see, I think, a little bit around the corner before, while you're halfway down the block, and you begin, oh, I know where that's going. Okay, so they're going to do A, we're going to do this, right? So we're willing to do that. And the central element, the coin of that realm, if you will, is risk.
Mm-hmm.
You and I are much more inclined towards the risk, as you just noted. Okay, we may not hit everything, but guess what we're going to do? We recognize our actions have a ripple effect on the wider body politic. And that's the end game. That's what you're trying to change. I'm not just trying to win North Carolina Senate race, because I know if I win the North Carolina Senate race, or if I lose the North Carolina Senate race, the way I play that race will have a ripple effect. And that's a lot of what we did in 2010. And like I said, I had a lot of resistance inside the party, because when I first announced the 50-state strategy, they thought it was a waste of money. You're putting money in Wyoming. You're putting Illinois, for the first time in the history of the state of party of Illinois, and they received money from the National Committee at a level where they could actually go out and win races. Wisconsin was another. You have these states that have always kind of been on the sideline, in the periphery. And I'm like, well, I need to win those states, because this is about addition. I'm just trying to add more Republicans where I can. So that's one. The other piece of this, I think, which is why I applaud Gavin Newsom.
Mm-hmm.
What Gavin Newsom is doing is what you and I would do if we
Right.
were the governor of California.
Except I'd go for more than 5 seats.
Bingo. So that's the other piece. So here's the game. Here's the way Republicans think on this. Republicans look at Democrats and go, they don't have the balls to do anything. They're not going to do anything. Republicans think that Democrats just don't have it in them to respond. So they do what they're doing in Texas because they figure, yeah, what you going to do about it? Oh, y'all going to leave the state? Boo-hoo. Guess what? You got to come back home at some point, right? And when you do, we're going to hold the vote. Okay, that's the attitude, that's the thinking. But when you say, oh, okay, Texas, we know you think you got us blocked, but I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to ask our Democratic governors to do exactly what you're doing. But instead of trying to match you seat for seat, we're telling them, get 3 extra seats,
Right.
get 7 extra seats. My attitude would be every seat a Republican tries to steal in a midterm, we take 3, we take 4. Because it's not a one-on-one game. Because if you try to play that game, now you're scrambling around trying to figure out where you're getting your numbers from. State like California, I'm looking at redrawing every friggin' congressional district.
Right.
And I'm going to grab 3-4 seats out of every one that I can.
Yep.
And so now all of a sudden, Republicans think they're getting 5 seats out of Texas. California just added another 20 for Democrats.
Yeah. What do you, when you are doing your show, who do you think of as your audience? I don't mean that literally. Obviously, you guys have lots of demographic data that tells you who's actually watching. But
Right.
but who do you like? Is it aimed at the undecided voter? Is it aimed at the person involved in politics? Is it aimed at the person who is, a moderate? Is it aimed at the true believers who hate Trump? Like who are you? Because I find you speaking to me, who is someone who is sort of professionally in politics, and you are speaking to me. But I wonder, like, if that's intended, because there probably aren't that many of us who are professionally in politics, or if you are, like, you're aiming at the person who is attentive. Like, who are you talking to?
It's interesting. The way I approach it is a conversation that is overheard by whoever wants to listen. So it's like being at a restaurant and you have the table next to you and you've got somebody who's talking and you hear their conversation. You're like, okay, hold up.
That's interesting.
I know what you're doing. Listen over here, and I get that that's working because when I go out, I don't run into political professionals like Marc Elias, right? So guys like yourself who kind of get the game and see how all the pieces fit. The average, American who tunes in, watches the show, they respond back from their couch, from their kitchen table, from their office, and they connect. I hear a lot of. The other day when you said X, I was thinking that exact same thing, and it was so good to hear someone finally say this. When you challenge up against the conventional wisdom and the conventional thinking or the conventional approach, people. I'm not so much surprised now because I have a better sense of it. But early on, I was really surprised at just how hungry people were for someone to do something other than the conventional thing. Folks, that's why Donald Trump is Donald Trump, because Donald Trump does the unconventional thing. And for people who have grown bored, tired, frustrated, angry with American politics and their political party and the system, that's entertainment for them. And they kind of gravitate to that. And they watch. Trump knows it's a different episode every day. right?
Right.
But the serious consequences of all of that come later. And that's what you and I are trying to alert people to in our conversations is, yes, I appreciate the fact that you like, Bobo the clown. I get it. You really like the clown show that it's entertaining you right now. But here's the deal. Your healthcare will change for you.
Right.
Your job situation will change for you. Your educational opportunity, all of these things are going to impact you now. And then it's not funny. And so you need to understand now why this is happening, and more importantly, what can be done. And so that part of it does have an appeal across the board. Yes, the political professionals, but also the people who check in and out from time to time, because something happens and they're okay. What do I need to know about this? Or they hear something, they get angry and they get frustrated. They want to know more about it and they tune in. And so you've always got to be prepared to have that conversation in a way in which you're edifying them. You're also, and what I get a lot, and I'm sure you get a lot too, is what can I do?
Right. Yeah.
Which is a hard question to answer sometimes. Well, I'll be honest, a lot of times, because you don't have an opposition party that's giving people something to do. And okay, we have no Kings weekend. You got all these people across the country fired up. What did you do the following week?
I'll be right back with more of my conversation with Michael Steele in a moment. But I started Democracy Docket in 2020 to be the leading outlet for news, information, and analysis for everything happening to democracy in courts, from voting rights to free and fair elections to the latest that Donald Trump is doing to try to undermine democracy and the rule of law in this country. Now he's issued a federal takeover of Washington, D.C., and turned the Department of Justice into a political weapon. In order to cover all of this and keep you informed, the team at Democracy Docket is growing to meet this moment, but it needs your support. So please become a Democracy Docket premium member today for $10 a month or $120 a year. Your support will help keep you informed and everyone else up to date. Thanks. So one of the issues that I feel like I have had trouble getting people to pay attention to, that I think is actually one of the greatest threats to democracy right now, is something you addressed on the last time I was on. Mm-hmm. And that is what's happening in the District of Columbia. And I don't know if people are not paying attention to it because they just figure, okay, that's Washington, D.C., or if it's just too abstract, or maybe they are paying attention to it and I'm just not getting the feedback that they are. But I thought you did a really good job of articulating for your audience why they should care about what's happening in DC. So talk a little bit about that. I know some of it is born of your own personal upbringing, which I didn't know you had grown up. I assumed you'd grown up in Maryland, but part of it was, I assume, is somewhat personal. But talk a little bit about what's happening in DC right now.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand a lot here, and you put your finger on what I believe is the core of the problem when it comes to the District of Columbia, because people look and go, "Oh, that's DC." And a lot of that's born out of how DC is situated. We are a federal city, born out of compromise between among the founding fathers of where they wanted to put the nation's capital. And they wanted it to be in a space where it would be the least political. Right?
That didn't work out.
It had zero power relative to the other states. And that's why they pulled it out of New York, because they showed with the economic, hub being New York, they didn't want that. They didn't want it in Virginia because of the political pedigree of Virginia and all of that. So we get it. So they carve a little bit out of Maryland, they carve a little bit out of Virginia, and they create this place. And over time and space, people would come to the city and they, do the federal business, they go home. Then they came to the city to do the federal business and they stayed. and they raised families and they created community, and it grew into what it is today. It is a city of 700,000 people, roughly, who did not receive the ability to vote for the president of the United States until 1964.
Wow.
So if you lived in the District of Columbia in 1960, you couldn't vote for John F. Kennedy for president, or Richard Nixon. You couldn't vote for the presidential candidate. It did not receive the ability to govern itself limitedly until 1973, when finally Congress granted and allowed their home rule bill to stand. Congress still controls the budget of the city, which is why Donald Trump's taking $1 billion from the District of Columbia and then bitching about crime is the DC problem. So for native Washingtonians like myself, this time is the culmination of what has been an ongoing history of people pissing on the city, thinking that it's just federal, white marble buildings, and having no appreciation or understanding of the families that have been raised there, educated there, and have moved from DC to other places like myself to become political leaders and influencers. DC is still my heart and home. My dad still lives there in the city. I have family that lives in the city. And it's important for people to understand what is happening right now is something that is coming to your neighborhood soon. LA was the test case. LA was the test of whether or not this administration could federalize police, federalize the National Guard, and indiscriminately move them into a city. Now, remember, the pocket of Los Angeles that they were talking about relative to the city of Los Angeles was about the size of that coffee cup relative to the room you're in. So yet and still, there was such a big problem that Donald Trump wanted to move in the National Guard. DC now is the next step in that. And this is where they're going to experiment on how they actually use the this federalized National Guard to enforce Donald Trump's version of law and order. And that's why you're seeing now some of these folks already engaged in manhandling the city, the citizens of the city, and there's no repercussion for that, because under the Constitution, the president has that control over the city of Washington. Doesn't have that control because he's not a governor of a state, but he's acting that way so that they can set in motion when they move to Baltimore, when they move into New York City, when they move into other blue cities, Chicago, for example, because there's so much crime. There's so much. I'm like, you mean white people don't commit crime? Because all of this is about, because some to put it straight up, some white kid got his ass jacked by 16.
That's right.
Kids. That's what this is about.
That is what this is about. I don't know why I said this, I can't remember where I said this yesterday. We are in this situation in DC because Big Balls got beat up by a couple of teenagers.
That's it. So his balls clearly weren't that big because he couldn't handle some teenagers. But here we are. And so Donald Trump is now using all of that as a pretense for ultimately taking authoritarian actions in the city of Washington. Because remember, folks, complete the arc. There was a little thing called Lafayette Park in 2020.
Yep.
Right? Where they wanted to march across the park and push people out. And they had the Joint Chiefs in his uniform, Milley, and they're just walking through and they're pushing people out, and people were hurt. People were roughed up in that episode. And this now completes the arc of that, where he's now has taken control of the police force and ostensibly the streets of the city. And it's so stupid because you got these Humvees sitting where? Not in neighborhoods, because there's no crime.
Right.
They're sitting on Capitol property, at Union Station or sitting around Capitol Hill. So what are you there for?
Don't you find something disgusting in the symbolism, or not even symbolism, the intent that now six Republican controlled states, six governors, are sending their National Guard to Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
right?
I mean,
Literally to patrol in Washington, D.C.
yeah. And it's because typically those folks have a disjointed view of what Washington is. They think it's just, this city of black people.
Right.
Well, Washington is majority white now. Pretty much. I mean, it's
But
a
it
good
also has
look.
a tremendous history of a black middle class, black
Yes.
success stories. Like,
Yes. It is the neighborhoods from Sursum Quarter to Petworth where I grew up. You've got these neighborhoods that are eclectic, and Adams Morgan, have this wonderful Spanish Caribbean vibe to it. You've got these neighborhoods are the flavor of the city, and you have roughly a whole bunch of white folks in southern states who've never probably in many instances set foot in the city other to come here for Trump's inauguration or to come here to Capitol Hill to bitch their congressman about something. But they've never sat and spent time eating in a neighborhood diner or visiting parks in upper Northwest, Rock Creek Park, for example. And so they're singing the National Guard for two reasons. One, to appease Trump and to show, hey, I'm as Trump as you are, and I'm a loyal Trumper. But they're also, sort of fulfilling this kind of
that's right.
view of Washington that they've always had, that somehow, this crime riddled, smelly place. Why is it smell? Because they're people of color here. What do you say that when you go to Appalachia? Do you refer when you have a lot of poor whites in Mississippi? Do those places smell? Are they trashy and dirty? Why don't you use the National Guard to go deal with the crime in your own city? You don't have urban communities in Alabama and Louisiana and places like, come on, stop it. So we know what's going on here. The frustration is Washington, because of its unique status, does not have the ammunition to fight back because it doesn't have a governor. It has a mayor. It
Yeah,
doesn't have a state legislature. It has a city council. And they only exist because there was a piece of paper that was created and passed in 1973 that allowed them to self-govern. But even that's not a complete mission for them because there are limits on the degree to which they
that's
can
right.
govern themselves. The mayor cannot, as we just saw in the 2020 debacle with Trump, the mayor, is blamed for stuff that she had no
That's right.
control over.
That's right. Um, I got to ask you one other question, sort of a personal question. So I've said this on a number of occasions when people, say nice things about me and that I'm courageous. And like I always say that, look, I've had it easy. I was a Democratic lawyer. I am fighting what I think is the fight of our generation for democracy and for free and fair elections. But um, the people who are the real heroes here are the people who were Republicans who are standing up against Donald Trump. I'd like to think that if the shoe were on the other foot, I would be doing what you are doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to think that if the shoe were on the other foot, I'd be doing what the women, and there were all women who testified before
Mm-hmm.
Congress in the January 6th committee here, what Nicole Wallace has done, what Tim
Mm-hmm.
Miller has done, right? I could go down a list of former Republicans who have spoken out about the risk that Donald Trump poses to this country. Um, but I don't know that I would, and I haven't been called
I
upon to
think you
do that.
would. I
But I
think.
haven't
I
been
think.
called upon to do it, and you have, and
Yeah.
a lot of your former colleagues haven't. And I'm curious, like, what gave you the courage to do that?
Well, first off, let me state I believe very firmly you would. I think you have struck me as someone who is nothing if not consistent. So you could not look at what's happening on the Republican side and feel one way. And then if it happened on the Democratic side, feel differently.
Yeah.
That you would be consistent in your push for democracy, free and fair elections, the rule of law, all the things that you're articulating, which is why I connect with you why to answer your question, it's been so disappointing for so many other of my political friends that they haven't, that they capitulated, that they did more than bend the knee. They exposed themselves to be liars when it came to the truth of the arguments we made as Republicans about the rule of law, about the constitutional norms, the institutions, standing with our allies, understanding who the evil empire really is, and all of that, watching a lot of them fall by the wayside because of their silence, because of their inaction. After January 6th, all Mitch McConnell had to do was rally 3 Republicans and convict Donald Trump.
Right.
And we would not be here. That says, I don't care what else you say. The fact that the Republican Party looked at the evil of January 6th, cursed that evil, condemned that evil, and then walked away when it was time to hold that evil accountable. That told me in that moment that anything this party thought it valued, it no longer did. So I get the question, then why do you stay? I stay because principally those values still matter. It's not MAGA, it's not Trump, it's Republican. And I think about Lincoln every damn day and the fight that he had to try to hold on to that value of individual liberties and freedoms. It's why we went to war in the 1860s. It's why we're at war now. Because it's about the things that you mentioned, free and fair elections. This doesn't work if Donald Trump gets to twist the ballots and lie and tell people how to vote and who to approve. This doesn't work if that system is corrupted. It doesn't work if our institutions bend and break. And so for me, this is the value proposition. I no longer rely on these men and women because they are useless to the cause. And at a certain point, Marc, they're all going to come back and act like, oh, well, I was with y'all all the time. Bitch, please.
And you'll call it like it is.
Yeah, it's not how it works. So that for me is that's the prima facie case. And I don't worry about guys like you. I distress because I don't have more of you on my side. And I don't have individuals who are brave enough to risk their livelihood or whatever, to risk something. And as I try to tell them, the network is stronger than you think it is.
Yeah.
And if there's a group of Republicans, our Republican legacy, started by Senator Danforth and a handful of Republicans like myself, who are trying to create that space inside the party for Republicans like us who want to take the fight directly at the state level, the grassroots level, because that's where you're going to have to battle this out. And so there are efforts underway, and they're gaining ground and traction. But in terms of the political elected leadership, nah, that change ain't coming from them.
Yeah. Well, Michael Steele, you are a hero of mine. You are also the co-host of my must-watch TV. And as I said, the audience can see that I live what I preach. I only go on 2 or 3 shows, and yours is one of them. Yours and Nicole Wallace, frankly, are the two.
Right.
And so I hope everyone tunes in to watch the weeknight 5 nights a week. It is a great show hosted by Michael, Simone Sanders Townsend, and Alicia Menendez, all of whom I've known. I actually know Michael the least long of the 3,
Yep.
but thank you for being here today.
Thank you, my friend, and we love having you on. Like I said, you bring it, you keep it real. It's always engaging, and everyone learns a little bit more of how to deal with what's going on, and hopefully begin to take some small actions that can lead to defending our country from the assault that is currently under.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Defending Democracy. Please make sure you're subscribed to Democracy Docket's newsletters to stay informed on the latest voting rights and democracy news.